Hi there, and welcome to our career webinar on the Field Reimbursement Manager role. We're so glad to have you joining us all from all over. Just to get things started, why don't you take a moment in the chat and tell us where you're joining from today? It's always fun to see the global reach of the pharmaceutical industry, of our attendees and our learners, of all of our webinars. So go ahead and hop in the chat, let us know where you're joining from. We'll just give everyone about a minute or two to join in, and then we'll officially get started. I see a lot of people from both the West Coast and the East Coast. See some fellow Georgians in here. Alrighty, let's go ahead and get started. We have a really great conversation for today for you. Again, welcome everyone to today's webinar, Career Insight, a day in the life of a field reimbursement manager. My name is Kiana Dixon, and I am the moderator and host for this session. ACMA, the Accreditation Council for Medical Affairs, is hosting this webinar to provide you with valuable insights and expertise on the critical topic and role of reimbursement and field reimbursement managers in healthcare. As providers of the official prior authorization certification, PACS, we understand the significant impact of the different players and the roles that are involved in this process, including FRMs. So today, you'll hear from an accomplished patient solutions architect, Catherine Braxton, who has spearheaded the implementation of comprehensive patient access processes to empower HCPs and their patients in navigating this intricate payer landscape. Catherine, welcome. If you could you please tell us a bit about yourself for our attendees today?
Absolutely, Kiana. Thank you so very much for having me. So excited to be here. So my career has spanned a little bit over 15 years, with, of course, the early years of my career being centered in administrative roles, both in private practice and large clinic systems. I later moved into the reimbursement analytics and patient access roles within what is known as the specialty pharmaceutical reimbursement hubs. In doing so, I have been able to work, as you stated, to design comprehensive patient support processes that are centered around being a center touch point to connect practitioners as well as patients to a levy of resources that help them to navigate through the payer landscape and to obtain maximum reimbursement for these very expensive high dollar specialty medications.
Thank you. I think we're going to, just from your bio already, your introduction, I know this is going to be an exciting conversation that we'll have. Also,
Absolutely.
Kat didn't mention, she is also certified as a prior authorization certified specialist. So we may touch on this a little later because a lot of our attendees as well are PAC certified.
Yes.
Now, during this webinar, I will interview Catherine to share her unique experience as an FRM and to also provide some insight to those who are joining us today that may be interested in these roles. We'll also leave time today for a question and answer session at the end. So please feel free to submit your questions throughout today's interview and today's conversation. Before we begin, I do want to share an important disclaimer. All opinions expressed by our speaker, Catherine, today during this webinar does not reflect the opinions of Syneos Health. It's reflective of parent companies or affiliated companies. Catherine is presenting her own unique perspective and experiences as an FRM. Again, the views shared today are hers alone and not representative of her employer or any organization. With that being said, let's go ahead and dive into the insights and expertise that we have set up for you today. So for today's agenda, how we will navigate today's conversation, these are our objectives for today. We will first start with a quick overview of the FRM role, right? We will paint that picture to you as to what it entails, the key responsibilities, and how FRMs help providers and patients navigate this reimbursement process that you keep hearing us mention, right? Next, we'll dive into a typical day in the life of an FRM, covering the day to day activities, priorities, and challenges that they may face in the field. We'll then explore the essential skills and the knowledge required to be successful within this role. After that, Catherine will share her own career path and transition into the FRM role and provide insights on how she developed the necessary expertise. We'll also discuss strategies for staying up to date, right, on the ever evolving reimbursement landscape and also how FRMs collaborate with key stakeholders, both internally and externally. Finally, we'll wrap up at the end with Catherine offering some valuable advice for aspiring FRMs, as well as her perspective on the future of this critical role in the healthcare industry. Again, although we will hit and touch on all of these topics, we will leave plenty of time for question and answer at the end. So please feel free to submit your questions at any time. So let's go ahead and dive right into the FRM role. Before we go into the definition, I'm interested, Kat, from your perspective. Can you begin by explaining to us all the role of a field reimbursement manager? What are those key responsibilities associated with this position?
Absolutely. So, when we think of the role of a field reimbursement manager, the first thing that people really want to inquire about is what does that field element actually entailed. So this is what we consider a heavily based client facing travel role. The standard FRM is usually in the field anywhere from 4 to 5 days out of the week. We're traveling within an assigned territory, and we're really working hands on with providers' offices, hospital personnel, specialty pharmacy managers, and we're working in the field to get into these organizations so that we're able to really help them navigate the reimbursement issues for the particular drugs that we are covering. Um, it's very much a highly skilled profession. It is a non-sales role, and definitely want to point that out. It varies from sales, so there is a line of demarcation between the reimbursement side and the sales side. But we focus on offering support to healthcare professionals and their staff. We leverage our extensive knowledge of the insurance coverage landscape, patient access programs. Of course, we work with the practices to really provide personalized support throughout the reimbursement process. That's from the start, where the prescription is written, all the way through fulfillment, and even thus after. In a lot of cases, FRMs are involved in that process, of ensuring that patients remain adherent to these therapies. So it's a very nuanced role, very specialized, but we're really focusing on navigating through the payer landscape to get to the place where we're able to maximize reimbursement.
Okay. Now, you mentioned when you discuss the term field and what that means as a field reimbursement manager, you have your own territory. Is
Yes.
this state to state, or does this depend on the organization you work on?
It's going to depend heavily on the organization. For some companies, these territories are much more concentrated, small city organizations that focus on outliers. For my particular position, mine is state by state. I cover a total of 5 states, several large metro areas. So that depends heavily on the organization and how they really map out the landscape for the FRMs.
So, are there any possibilities or opportunities for those who may want to work from home or not travel as much for an FRM?
There are some organizations who have what are called virtual FRMs. This is usually target for white space. These are usually more rural areas that don't have a high patient population. So for some organizations, that is an option. But when you speak of field reimbursement, always keep in mind that field element travel is going to be required. And sometimes it is very extensive depending on what type of territory you have.
Interesting. Now, for you, what is a typical day like as an FRM? Can you walk us through your daily activities and your duties?
Absolutely, absolutely. So again, this is working on keeping that leverage of knowledge on a daily basis. Again, I'm usually traveling in the field anywhere from 3 to 4 days out of the week. During my travel days, I work in person with healthcare providers again, and especially pharmacies, to really address any patient escalations that we have, any situations that are causing delays to fulfillment, significant part of the job involves educating these individuals on the complex processes that are related to billing and coding, claim submissions, copay assistance, the prior authorization process as we work to drill down on payer policies. We're in the offices or in the hospitals or working with the specialty pharmacies to really facilitate script fulfillment. FRMs typically interact with multiple key accounts in a single day. So I'm usually seeing anywhere from 4 to 6 hospitals or providers' offices. We make those outreach efforts, and they're typically driven by our case status updates, and we keep that information visible to us. And that kind of gives us our charge to let us know where we're going to be needed the most within our assigned territories.
Gotcha. Now, in that sense, in your day-to-day activities, are you educating HCPs and specialty pharmacies on a proactive or a reactive basis?
You work from both perspectives. There are some
Okay.
offices, especially the IDNs in the hospitals, who really have their process significantly in line and in order. From that perspective, we're just working proactively to really kind of make sure that they are up to date on any special program offerings that we have from a patient support side. We work with some of these hospitals to ensure that we're working in connection with the sales reps. Maybe it's a situation where we're looking to get on formulary with the hospitals. So we come in from the FRM access side to really provide updated information on that proactively. But there also is a reactive aspect of the job, going up back again to those escalations that we get, the denied prior authorizations, the situations where we're looking to get fulfillment information or interaction from the provider's offices, and maybe that's not happening. That's where we take our charge to work proactively to really get into those offices and do that education.
Interesting.
Mhm.
That leads us really into our next section, I think. The essential skills that you need in order to support that proactive and reactive conversation.
Yes.
What would you say are the essential skills and knowledge required to be successful in those responsibilities that you just mentioned?
Absolutely. It's very important for individuals to have at least a general understanding, specifically of the buy and bill process. You also want to ensure that you have a knowledge of billing and coding. You want to be knowledgeable of coverage trends. You want to have an understanding of reimbursement, especially from the position of dealing with Medicare and Medicaid. It's really, really crucial to have a deep understanding of the current payer landscape. And that's among all payers, whether it's managed care, commercial, government, or in the federal sectors. You really need to be able to comprehend these payer policies because they can be a little tricky and somewhat difficult to navigate for the lay patients. You would be able to have an ability to build strong relationships. That's a significant part of the job. So, excellent communication skills are very necessary. You have to have a level of relatability as well as empathy, and the ability to work with an urgency, as you are going to be dealing with situations that are very time sensitive. I think the ability to work collaboratively daily is a major one, and having those great communication skills because you're dealing with so many stakeholders, kind of as that center touch point person. So, successful script pull through is going to depend on your ability to really be able to work as a team player while adhering to compliance standards and working cross functional with multiple stakeholders again. So, additionally, I would also say that you want to have some level of flexibility in quickly being able to adjust to change and having the ability to work independently to find solutions to these complex problems that you tend to run across within the FRM role.
Interesting. You hit on an important topic of relationship building and empathy, right? And when we discuss building relationships in any sector, especially within the pharmaceutical industry, that conversation of empathy, EQ, or emotional intelligence comes up.
Yes.
In terms of relationship building as an FRM, are you initiating and creating or developing these contacts or accounts, or are you enhancing the relationship that you and your organization already has with a team of HCPs?
It's actually a little bit of both. In this role, you're going to be assigned within your territory. Research has already been done to kind of really establish who are the power players for a particular drug therapeutic area. So your client list is kind of built out based on that. But then also, you have a responsibility to be proactive and being able to seek out additional stakeholders who could be potential prescribers within this particular role. Also, that's going to involve working heavily with your sales partner colleagues because as FRMs, we don't generate demand, but we work with our cohorts on the Salesforce side who are able to reach out to additional organizations, additional prescribers, additional hospitals. And in that case, we begin to work reactively to establish those relationships. So you're going to see it from both sides within the FRM role.
It's interesting. Thank you for that insight. That was something that I've been thinking on myself.
Yes.
Can you share the career path that led you to becoming an FRM? What are some of those key milestones that you think prepared you for this role?
Yes, again, so going back to those early years, really being able to hold down those operation management roles within private practice and large clinic systems, that was really my training ground. There in that space is where we're looking to really drill down on really understanding the nuances of billing and coding. In those roles, you're really looking at that practice management aspect. So it gives you an opportunity to kind of work from that space where you're multitasking, which is a big part of what an FRM does, really understanding the reimbursement landscape, really understanding what it looks like to submit these claims, having information and knowledge on what it means to submit clean claims, understanding the denials process. So a big part of that is really just having that solidified foundation, really working within the healthcare field and having knowledge of the insurance process. I think that's been my biggest leverage in being able to be successful within my role over the years. Specifically, later on, moving into the hub access space, that's a big element, especially on the pharma side of things. It gives you a different aspect of creativity that you're not necessarily familiar with when you're working directly in the practices or within the hospitals. It opens you up to a better understanding of the pharma side of things. And I think that's necessary. While these elements can be taught, it's great if you're able to come in with that knowledge already being established because it's going to help make the transition a little bit smoother for you in the FRM role.
Are you able to bring, as an FRM in your discussions with HCPs, your own anecdotal experience from your past roles,
Yeah.
or is that separate?
Yes, absolutely, you can. Again, that goes back to that relatability factor. These
Mhm.
practices, these prescribers, the specialty pharmacies, they want to know that you really have an understanding of their administrative process, that you have an understanding of the nuances that they're dealing with on a regular basis. While we never want to direct prescribers in a certain direction, just them knowing that you have an understanding of what their day to day looks like definitely makes a difference when establishing that relationship.
Mhm. So really, again, building yourself to be relatable to your stakeholders as an
That is
FRM.
correct. Absolutely.
Okay.
Big, big part of
Well,
the job.
I've listed a bit here of information of common career paths, or at least those experiences to help build that relatability. And we are more in tune to those in the audience of prior authorization experience. We see an overwhelming majority or overwhelming introduction of FRMs becoming PAC certified as a prior authorization certified specialist. And you are PAC certified. To you, what do you think the value is of PACs for FRMs?
Absolutely. So here's what I urge individuals to consider. When we are working during our college years or during our graduate years, we're really working to enroll in these programs so that we're able to gain knowledge and skills that will make us valuable to employers. And we have to look at the PAC certification in the same way. This is a program that offers a very solid competitive advantage because we're recognizing individuals as subject matter experts. The PAC PACS program dives deeply into a lot of the elements that we have been discussing here on the call. It gives you insight into the payer landscape. It's going to dive into the Medicaid and Medicare billing process. It's going to walk you through the process of dealing with prior authorizations, with rejections. You're going to get statistics about what these processes are looking like and how they affect patients. So it's a very viable program and a great certification to have. And it just shows that you have studied to show yourself approved to really be considered a subject matter expert in your particular roles. And doing so, when you're going into these offices, when you're meeting with the clients and they're able to see that certification there behind that name, it's letting the clients know that they're in good hands with a PACS credentialed FRM that's working on behalf of their patients.
Yes, I agree. I've heard from other graduates of the PACS program who are also FRMs, those leaders in those teams, where they come back and give us feedback because PACS is not only for FRMs, but also for those in direct patient care, those HCPs who are
Mhm.
submitting prior authorizations, that they can walk into a hospital or clinic, and because it's so well known and recognized now, that they're saying, hey, you have PACS, I have PACS as well. And so that helps with that relatability as an FRM when you're building out those relationships.
Absolutely.
Now, once you are an FRM, some of those responsibilities that you mentioned is staying up to date with reimbursement policies, insurance
Yes.
plan policies, and the reimbursement landscape. How
Mhm.
would you say, as an FRM, how do you stay up to date with the evolving reimbursement landscape and these regulations?
Sure. So my perspective has always been research, research, and then research some more. I believe that continuous self-education is so crucial, a very crucial factor in the success of an FRM role. It's important to understand the reasons behind every situation and every outcome. I definitely use professional platforms such as LinkedIn, where we're able to have a meeting of the minds from other individuals in the industry that provide valuable information and resources that help you to stay up to date about industry development. So, networking is a big part of staying up to date and maintaining your expertise. I also recommend subscribing to business journals that focus in on the pharma industry and provide these critical updates about developments, advancements in technology, new drugs that are coming to market, really understanding how the government is playing a role in the payer landscape. It's important to stay informed about payer policy updates, relying on that information from your client accounts, working collaboratively with them to research on information that they are getting that you may not have even been aware of. Companies are constantly looking for new tools and platforms. Systems like MMIT, which are leveraged as platforms that allow field teams to really stay up to date on covers that are related to payer trends. So there are so many resources out there that are available, but in that particular role, you have to be willing to research and seek out those particular tools.
Are you able to share maybe a challenging or complex reimbursement issue or situation that you had to navigate? How did you approach resolving that situation?
Yes, welcome to the world of an FRM. That's our that's our daily process. It's working on these escalations, running around putting out little flyers everywhere. It's always challenging, specifically when you are launching a new drug into the market. Getting buy-in from prescribers can be extremely difficult when these new medications are coming to market, or when access challenges arise, and it can quickly lead to dissatisfaction and hasty therapeutic switches from the prescriber side. I recently faced an issue with fulfillment with a contracted supplier. Patients were at risk of experiencing significant delays in therapies. My role in that process was really be able to help the prescriber quickly find an alternative fulfillment pathway to minimize that disruption for the patient. Being able to draw on my knowledge of the market and supplier contracts, I was able to connect the prescribing clinic with other fulfillment service options that would not only benefit them for our product, but for various other therapies that the clinic was working with as well. So So again, that goes back to that research and really zeroing down on the tools that you have available to you, reaching out to your network, working with your direct managers, because at the end of the day, our goal is to ensure that we are getting patients on therapy with the least amount of barriers to access and making sure that they stay on therapy.
Now, in that example situation that you had, I heard there were a lot of parties involved, right? You mentioned the supplier, you mentioned the provider, as well
Yes.
as the patient, right? The ultimate goal.
Mhm.
And when you're navigating any situation in reimbursement, it seems like you have to have relationships or speak to multiple teams, right?
Yes.
Here's an example illustration that I put
Mhm.
together that really illustrates the key stakeholders involved in healthcare reimbursement. Right? We have the payer, we have the provider and the pharmacy, and of course, ultimately the patient. And these are just a few, right? I didn't
Mhm.
even mention the pharma organization, the manufacturer, or the
Yes.
supplier. And each of these entities really plays a critical role. But the misalignment of incentives or lack of transparency can really lead to breakdowns in this process, really at one stage. And so it
Yes.
seems like there's a lot of hands in the pot. And oftentimes there comes that misalignment because we aren't
Mhm.
visible to each other's process.
Correct.
Now, to you, what are some of those most primary stakeholders you collaborate with, as an FRM?
Mhm. Absolutely. And Kiana, that is a perfect diagram. While there are a few key players that are missing, but that is the center of the work that the FRM does, kind of standing in as that center touch point to kind of connect the pieces to the puzzle. In the FRM role, you work closely with stakeholders both within and externally of your organization. It's so important to be able to partner, of course, with your field sales team, again, as I mentioned earlier. Together, when you're looking at that diagram that you created, those roles play a crucial part in connecting clinic education with patient access education. Again, with these stakeholders, that communication is vital. And all parties have to understand and work within those specified swim lanes to ensure compliant interaction. And again, it goes back to the statement that you made. A lot of times the disconnect comes because there's not an understanding of the role that each individual plays. What roles does the specialty pharmacy play? What role does the sales rep play? What responsibility does the prescriber have in the process? Again, zeroing back into the forward distribution centers, that's another factor that we have to consider. There are so many moving pieces, and an FRM is there again to kind of create that puzzle, bring it all together, and be that center touch point.
And those puzzle pieces that you're mentioning are, like you mentioned, both internally and external. You have
Yes,
those internal stakeholders that you work with. You mentioned sales team often. You may also discuss with medical affairs and
yes.
juggling that with those external stakeholders that you are educating, right? In addition to those internal stakeholders, it seems like there's a lot of names listed here. How would you say you're able to manage those relationships effectively?
Again, I think a big part of that is really being able to do the research to understand the role that each stakeholder plays, understanding what is within the scope of that wheelhouse and what isn't, and then understanding as an NFRM where you have to kind of make up for that lack. I think that's an important part of what I do on a daily basis. There are going to be some areas that are gray, and we have to figure out which direction that moves into and which stakeholder is responsible for that. And if something is not happening, if something is not taking place, if the ball is being dropped somewhere, that FRM has to be the one to kind of make up for that lack. So that's a big part of what we do within our role on a daily basis.
So this is some great tidbits.
Yes.
Now, as we move forward into the future of the FRM role, I'm really here stepping into maybe the audience's future as well as the future overall for reimbursement. For those interested here, what advice would you give to someone who is interested in pursuing a career as an FRM? What steps would you recommend they take to prepare for this role?
Sure. So I think it's important to really identify your transferable skills and understand how they can be used in the field access and reimbursement space. I also think it's important to really be certain that you can commit to life on the road. Living out of a suitcase can be tedious. It requires a significant amount of time away from home, away from family. Living out of a suitcase is not for the faint of heart. Let's be clear on that. It's a very, very demanding career space. So I think you must consider all of the logistical, personal, as well as mental factors before taking on a field access and reimbursement role. Again, I say research is everything. Research thoroughly before making any commitments to this type of a position. Please know that not all organizations are created the same. So we have to be mindful of organizational culture, leadership styles. You want to be aware that in some cases, the average contract retention time, and understand that the marketplace demand for these therapies that you may potentially support could eventually abruptly come to an end. That's something that FRMs who work in the contracting space deal with. So you have to be also really realistic about your earning potential based on your professional experience and knowledge. And again, I say it's necessary to research the average sales rate, salary rates, so that you are well prepared to be able to negotiate your pay effectively when you are offered potentially a position in the FRM space. And these things don't just apply to FRM roles. I think it applies to any position that you may be applying for. You really want to research and really know the ins and out of the position.
I agree. Again, no matter where you are in what space, those key tips that you mentioned will apply. Identifying your transferable skills, being able to communicate those transferable skills, right? Doing that research. This is any tips or advice for any career. Another is also further education and training.
Yes,
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention again the PACS program here as furthering your education and training on the topics and expertise surrounding the FRM roles, such as prior authorizations and reimbursement. Right? Again, this is that industry recognized program for prior authorizations, and we see many FRMs complete this program. The
absolutely.
impact that we the impact that we see here on PACS is well documented, right? We hear Kat understanding and explaining her experiences completing the program and the impact that it's made on her role. But we have testimonials again that really highlight the same mentions, right? How it enhances their conversation with their stakeholders, with HCPs and with nurses, with pharmacies as well, helping them to become an expert so that they can then better educate their stakeholders. Now, looking ahead, Kat, how do you see the role of the FRM evolving in the future, given these ongoing changes that we're seeing in the healthcare industry?
Absolutely, Kiana. So the commercial teams at biopharma companies have really incorporated the FRM role into their operations for a little bit, well over a decade now, if I'm not mistaken. But although technological advancements are providing patients and prescriber with new tools, we cannot ignore that human element remains crucial in patient care and access. So the FRM role is not going anywhere anytime soon. We do know and recognize that we're moving forward, specifically in the prior authorization space with AI. Artificial intelligence is taking over in various aspects of the patient access, market access, and payer landscape. Small to mid-sized companies are gearing up to launch new products. In particular, we will continue to rely on so many of these platforms, these databases, and these new advancing technologies. So, looking ahead, the FRM role will likely necessitate greater technology proficiency. FRMs will be needing to be well versed in data analytics and data manipulation to really be able to address access concerns moving forward as technology continues to advance.
So, as technology advances, as technology really evolves as a whole, so does the FRM role. Looks like we have to become more specialized
Yes,
in answering those questions and how to navigate those tools. I agree that the
absolutely.
FRM role
Absolutely.
isn't going anywhere. Yeah,
No,
it's
we're here to stay.
right. We're always discussing. It always feels as if the hot topic surrounding reimbursement or surrounding healthcare really as a whole in the pharmaceutical industry is drug pricing. And when we discuss drug pricing, we have to discuss reimbursement, and
Yeah.
as this conversation continues to become a hot topic, so will FRMs.
Absolutely, absolutely. I completely agree. And in many cases, while FRMs don't necessarily speak directly to pricing from a compliance standpoint, really understanding that reimbursement is absolutely what providers are looking for, especially when we talk about the buy and bill aspect.
Gotcha. Do you, in your role as an FRM, uh, although you mentioned that you don't discuss drug pricing specifically, do you interact with HEOR or your HEOR team or those pharmacoeconomic studies?
Absolutely. That element is very, very important again because these individuals are actually drawing information from the FRMs. We're there in the
Mhm.
field actively drawing in this data. We're seeing where the problems lie. We're seeing where the pushback is coming from. So that information is really being drawn from individuals who are on the front line, whether it be an FRM, whether it be the case managers that are working there in the pharmaceutical hubs that are doing the drill down, whether the feedback is coming directly from the provider practices. So that is another stakeholder within that center touch points that we work with on a daily basis as well.
Awesome. So you are really, again, as that field role, you are gaining insight into what HCPs are interested in, what their needs are for their patients and for reimbursement, and bringing that back as an insight to your organization to really further shape that post commercialization strategy for a product. Yes.
Absolutely. Dead on, Kiana.
Mm, gotcha. All right, so I feel as if we've connected a few dots today, both for myself and hopefully for the audience. Again, we've covered a lot of ground today. And now, in our last about 15 to 20 minutes, I'd like to open the floor to any questions that you, the audience, have submitted. Oh, we have a first question. I have my certification in pharmaceutical industry. Can you talk about buy and bill? What experience is required?
Absolutely. So again, what you really want to know again is going back to that understanding of the pain landscape. Particularly, you want to have a deep understanding of Medicaid. That's a big one. That's where we see a lot of hang up, a lot of pushback because we have individuals, even within the prescribers' offices, who may not be well versed to what it looks like to bill Medicaid. You really want to be able to research and drill down again, going back to that PAC certification, Kiana. That's one of the things that we can say
Right.
is going to be a very benefit. Really being able to understand and research what the buy and bill landscape looks like, understanding what those reimbursement levels are, helping the providers' offices to really understand their contracts with the payers is going to be significant as well. So again, that research is a big element of that, Patricia.
Thank you. What is the level of information that you share as an FRM with the sales team?
This is a biggie. This is a biggie. So again, you heard me mention earlier the swim lanes. From a compliance standpoint, you really need to understand that the FRM and the sales reps are two parts of a whole. While the ultimate goal alignment is the same, we're working from two different pathways. The sales team is there to generate demand and speak to the clinical inquiries of the providers' offices and the prescribers and the IDNs. The FRM is there to speak strictly to patient access. That is what we do. That's our lane. That's where we dwell. So, for every organization, you have what are called rules of engagement. These are kind of the guardrails that FRM are assigned to you and aligned to you, and that keep us in a level where we're able to know what information should be shared with the sales team and what shouldn't. Now, that's going to vary from company to company, but there are a lot of things most often that are not going to be shared with the sales team. Is going to be that patient protected health information. That's the number one thing that is typically guarded from the sales reps. But other than that, we usually share high level information. What is the current status of the case? Letting them know if we've gone into an office and spoke to a particular individual in the office, if there is a need for sales representative interaction, whether it be for samples, to go in and have a clinical discussion. The information that we share with the sales team from the reimbursement access is very, very high level, Paul.
Interesting. Now, as a follow up here to your answer, you mentioned the rules of engagement. Is the rules of
Yes.
engagement a list of rules that come from your organization, or are these set forth by a regulatory body?
Absolutely. So they come directly from the organization, but you also have to keep in mind that there is a legal compliance compartment for every particular organization. These
Mhm.
individuals are there to research what the policies are that govern the rules of the land to make sure that the organization is protected and that we may remain in compliance when we're interacting on a daily basis. So, yes, they are being developed from an organizational standpoint, but they're also being developed from a public policy and legal standpoint.
From Paula, any suggestions or tips on how to transition from a field sales role to an FRM role?
Actually, Paula, this is a really good question because we are seeing an upswing in the FRM role where more field sales individuals are transitioning over to the FRM role. And what that does is because in a sales position, just like the FRMs, you are there to leverage relationships. And that's very necessary in the FRM role. And if anyone knows how to do that, it's going to be a successful sales manager. So if you are in a sales role and you're thinking about transitioning over to the FRM side, again, I would say that if you don't have the knowledge and the experience relating to patient access as it relates to payer policies, buy and bill, this is something that you want to begin to research on your own and really be able to develop that knowledge because it's going to be kind of a fish out of water thing if it's elements that you are not familiar with. But we are definitely seeing an upswing in the trend of seeing individuals on the sales side transitioning into FRM roles.
How can one determine if a medication is available for buy and bill?
Absolutely. So I'm wondering if this is coming from the perspective of the patient or prescriber's office, or if this is on the side of the FRM drug sponsor. The FRM is going to know whether or not a drug is available for buy and bill. In most cases, for medications, buy and bill would be an option, but there are some medications that are strictly reliant on the pharmacy benefit. Usually, the way to tell that is doing a deep dive benefit investigation for a patient's particular plan that would let that individual know whether or not a medication could possibly be processed under buy and bill, as opposed to it being billed under the pharmaceutical benefit.
What are the next steps in your FRM career?
Absolutely. So again, I think for any FRM worth their salt, you're ultimately looking to move into the leadership space. And I personally do have a leadership experience, specifically in the pharmaceutical hub support roles. So operations management is an area that I'm familiar with, but I really, really enjoy what I do. But if there was a next level, next step, it would be moving into the director level role within the FRM space to really be able to share and leverage the knowledge that I've been able to gain to be a source of support for new individuals that are transitioning into the FRM role.
Still education.
Yes, that's it.
Yes. How do you acquire a pack? I'm assuming packs and cost. Is this required? I can answer this question. PAX is
Thank
not
you.
required to become an FRM. It's not required, but we just see majority of our enrollees that we see of PAX certified graduates, they are FRMs. How do you acquire PAX? More information is on our website, priorauthtraining.org. There you can learn more about PAX. You attending this webinar, we will send you a recording after the end of the webinar, and it should have the link in there for you. The cost of the program is currently $11.99. Can you please speak to transitioning from a patient access role to an FRM?
Absolutely. So, Mary Beth, if I'm reading your question correctly, I'm believing maybe you may be working within the clinic systems, private practice, or hospital, or you may even be in a hub support role within one of the patient access spaces. So, again, I think you are and if that's your position, you are in a perfect position to transition into an FRM role. That patient access knowledge is going to be your bread and butter. That's your jewel, that's your diamond. And you're going to want to leverage that. That knowledge is going to be necessary. And believe me that you are going to rely on it every day. Transitioning out of a patient access role into the field can take a little bit of time. It goes back to really making sure that you understand the organization, that you have an understanding, again, of that organizational culture, and really making sure that job fit is something that's going to work for you. So I think that's a big part of it. And then again, I would just say just be patient, because the FRM space is very competitive, very competitive. So you want to make sure, again, that you're leveraging all of your knowledge, all of your professional background, to really be that standout point that you're able to speak on when it comes to your resume, when it comes to your LinkedIn profile. Make sure that those elements of your career history shines through.
How important is knowledge and expertise in RIMS for FRMs to be successful?
It's an important element. It's not what would I say, a drill down factor that we deal with every single day, but you do have to have at least some general level of knowledge to really be able to be successful in that FRM role. Again, it's not something that is a necessary determining factor that one would be looking at as they're scanning through the resume of an FRM, but having that knowledge will work to your benefit.
How does one access availability of open jobs in each state?
Networking, big thing all the time. It's not what you know, it's who you know. Leverage that LinkedIn contact. Don't be afraid to go out there. Look for the individuals who are sourcing these job roles. Be sure to reach out to recruiters. Make sure that you're connecting with director level individuals, hiring managers, other FRMs. There are so many people who reach out to me on LinkedIn on a daily basis. I'm always willing to share any information or any knowledge I have about open positions. Networking is going to be your big one. I always tell people also not to depend solely just on one job site or one job board. You want to make sure that you're sourcing many of those accreditation level job placement sites. So make sure that your resume is up to date and that you're able to really source out the navigation of those careers that are available within your particular state.
Do you know if some companies will consider the amount of years of experience over the bachelor's degree that is required for most companies?
Absolutely. And that's again going to be on a company by company basis. No two organizations, again, are the same, but really be able to look down at those job descriptions. Many of the job roles, the FRM roles specifically, will let you know in lieu of the experience what that education level set should look like, or how that particular years of experience should offset the lack of educational experience. So many companies now are much more transparent in their job descriptions and job postings, and you can find a lot of that information when you're looking at those job roles.
Can one revisit information contained in PACT's certification program after one has completed it? Sure. Just very briefly, I can share, and then you also have these details in the slides that will be shared with you at the conclusion of the webinar. But the PACT program covers on every stage or player within the prior authorization process. We go over the processes, right? You learn the perspective of reimbursement and in prior authorizations from different players in that space. If you remember, we talked about pharmacies, the payer's perspective, as well as the provider's perspective. From the FRM, it's really important for them to understand those roles and what they go through in order to better educate them. So we really want to highlight that in the PACS program. Again, priorauthtraining.org has more information on PACS. Is there confidence in the longevity of this career? Once launch access is established, I've seen elimination of these roles within various companies. What has your experience been in these cases?
Absolutely. That's one of the things that I mentioned earlier when considering these FRM roles, specifically if you're dealing with contracted positions. That's one of the risk factors with the FRM role. While again, I say that the FRM role within the market is not going anywhere, a lot of this is really based on the longevity of the product. The success of the product really determines how long these roles can be built out. So you have to really be prepared, especially if you're working for a contracting level, not so much if you're a direct hire on the farmer side, but definitely if you're working in a contracted role, that is something that you can potentially see. And I myself have experienced FRM roles being phased out within my career. But please know that it is very well worth it. The bounce back, it's definitely something that keeps you motivated and keeps you pushing forward. But yes, that is a factor to consider when you're looking at a role as an FRM.
When looking into an FRM role, what sort of things do you look at? For example, culture, longevity of company, etc.
Absolutely. Again, company culture is so important to me. That's a big one. I think what we really are beginning to focus on for many employees is work life balance and mental health. You want to make sure that you're working for an organization that is conducive to you mentally, emotionally, and personally. So that's something that I look for. Culture is big. Leadership is a major factor. Leadership style is very important. You want to make sure that you're working in an environment where you're reporting to someone who really understands the day-to-day nuances of what it is that you're doing. A leader that works from a position of compassion, a leader that works from a position of servitude. So even within the interview process, those are some of the questions that I pose when we get to the end of that interview process. What does your particular leadership style look like? Again, and then just really understanding, of course, the company's longevity. We want to know what the company's expansion is going to look like in the future. How is the organization going to continue to grow? These are those questions that you want to ask when you are in that interview session. And as an interviewee, you're giving that opportunity to ask questions. This is where you really get to understand job fit for you and the organization.
Very good insight. I love that answer. This also poses a question. So, throughout today's webinar, what I'm hearing about the FRM role is it's really a mix between two common roles that I've studied as well: medical affairs in that education space, but
Mhm.
also sales, right? It's a mix or like a baby between both
Yes,
while not really leaning into one or the other.
correct.
And when we're looking at the evaluation of these roles, they're very different, right? Sales is very quantitative based versus medical affairs is very qualitative based. And so, with the FRM role being this mix in that baby, how would you really explain the evaluation or metrics for an FRM?
Absolutely. So, what the FRMs are looking at, again, because we are not generating demand, we're looking at ultimately pull through. When these patients are able to get on therapy, we're looking at the amount of time that it's taken for these patients to get on therapy. We're looking at feedback from the clients themselves, from the prescribers, from the IDNs, from the hospitals. How is the FRM helping them to navigate? Is the FRM able to provide solidified knowledge? Is there any errors within the process? Are we able to quantify how that communication is working with the FRM and the hub? Because that's a big part of that job too, ensuring that you have that working knowledge with your case manager. So there are a few metrics that we look at, but ultimately what we are looking at is script pull through. Are we able to work to help patients and providers navigate those barriers to access, overcome them, and get that patient on therapy in that small amount of time window that is there and available? So that's what we're looking at when we speak in terms of metrics of the FRM role.
Interesting. Thank you.
Mhm.
Now, I think that's all the time we have here for questions that were sent in. Thank you all to our attendees for joining us today and for your thoughtful questions. I'm seeing, Kat, a lot of grateful comments, a lot of appreciation in the comments for your insights in this conversation today. So, thank you for joining us. I'm very grateful for your expertise and the insights that you were able to provide. I know I've learned a lot. It seems as if our attendees has as well.
Thank you so very much, Kiana. It has been a pleasure. Thank you again.
Thank you. Again, everyone, thank you for joining us today. Please tune in and be on the lookout for our next webinar. It may be another career series. If you have any ideas or are interested in future topics, please reach out to us so that we can continue bringing you webinars that you are interested in. Alrighty, all. Thank you. Have a great Wednesday and a great week.